All right, this evening we begin chapter 25. And we will go down this evening probably through verse 18. I don't really want to get past 18 this evening because the next part of that, beginning with verse 19, begins kind of a separate storyline. Probably going to try to cover that on Sunday evening. We'll see how far we get. But chapter 25, verse 1, it says, "Now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah." Now, one thing we want to state on here, and I know many times that, I've kind of presented this just, I guess, simply because we make the assumption that Keturah was a new wife after the death of Sarah. However, that's an assumption. We cannot, based upon the way this is written, make that assumption. It is entirely possible that Keturah may have been a second wife, of course not counting Hagar, but a second wife to Abraham, and it's possible that he married her before Sarah died. We just simply can't make that assumption based upon how Moses has recorded this. Because he quite frequently, when he's trying to establish a timeline, Moses tended to use the phrase, "after these things." You'll notice he didn't say this in this particular case. He just said, "Now Abraham took another wife." So whether this was, again, after Sarah's death or whatever, we can't tell.
How old was he by the time Sarah died? Because he had
137, I believe.
He had 6 more children with this new wife.
Mm-hmm. But again, we can't really tell whether that was, because he died at 175, and whether he would have been 137 when Sarah died, which would have given him, about another 40, almost 40 years. But whether he fathered all these 6 kids in his extreme old age, we really don't know. Because, for example, when Isaac got married, we're going to be told, haven't gotten that far yet, but later on, if you look in verse 20, Isaac got married when he was 40. So it's kind of hard to follow on the timeline of some of the things in, who's having kids when, because Moses is not specific on some of these. Now, it is possible, and again, this is just a guess based on the language. It's possible Keturah may have been of African descent, because in Hebrew, the name Keturah basically means smoky. Now, I can't really think of any reason why somebody would name their daughter Smoky unless she had dark skin. But again, that's just an assumption. We don't know that for sure. But if you analyze the Hebrew of the name Keturah, essentially it means smoke or smoky. Don't know. Just something I thought I'd throw that. That's a freebie. All right, verse 2. It said, "And she bore to him Zimran and Yokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua." Mac, you want to analyze those names for us? I'm not going to either. But there is one, out of all of these, I could sit up here and spend an hour showing you, okay, well, this guy went here and this guy went there. nobody really knows for sure. There's a lot of theories as to how these sons all kind of spread out. But it's generally believed that for the most part, most of them lived and their descendants spread out all across the Arabian Peninsula. But 5 out of 6 of them really are just inconsequential. They descended from Abraham. They moved out across Arabia, as far as we know. But only one of them really is noteworthy here, because note that the one in the middle, his name is Midian. And what do we know about Midian?
The Midianites.
And why are the Midianites important?
Because they were in conflict with the Israelites. Is that the one that
Well,
I'm thinking of?
way later on down the line, but we don't really even need to go that far. Because when Moses escaped from Egypt, where did he go?
Land of Midian.
Land of Midian. And he married a wife who was of what descent? She was a Midianite. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, what does the Bible tell us about his particular claim to fame? Remember, he was a priest of Midian, which tells us a few things. Number one, the fact that Moses was willing to take Jethro's advice, and of course, we're talking several generations down the road here, but he married a Midianite woman. He certainly respected the advice coming from Jethro, who was a priest of Midian. What does that tell you about the likelihood of the Midianites?
They worship the one true God.
They worship the one true God. So a lot of the stuff that you see about, that, well, Abraham and, Isaac and Jacob, they were the only, folks, it's nonsense that they were the only worshipers of the true God. Now, granted, a lot of these people did get involved in paganism. A lot of them down the road, generations after that did worship God. Some of them got into paganism, but then by the same token, guess what?
So did the Israelites.
So did the Israelites. They weren't the only ones, But Abraham apparently did his job as a father and passed on his faith to his kids. Because, we don't know a whole lot about these other 5 kids, but we do know that apparently the Midianites, they had a belief in God. And we see them popping up again later during Moses' lifetime. All right, verse 3 says, and Jokshan became the father of Sheba and Dedan. Now, once again, what do we know about those?
Queen of Sheba.
Yeah. Apparently, it's believed that they might have moved down into the area of what today we would consider Ethiopia, possibly. The sons of Dedan were Asherim and Letashim and Loimim, and the sons of Midian were Ephah and Epher and Hanok and Abida and Eldaah. All these were the sons of Keturah. Now, Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living and sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east. Now, there's a few things in there. Now, number one, notice that we're told of Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. We have no record at all that Abraham ever had any concubines.
Except for this statement right here.
Well, what I was getting at is no concubines other than these. most theologians believe that Hagar and Keturah were never treated by Abraham on an equal level with Sarah, and that's why Moses refers, and again, assuming Moses is referring to these two women, referred to them as concubines. Now, it is possible Abraham may have had other concubines, but if so, again, we have no record of them, and there's no indication of any other kids, any other descendants, other than the ones from these three wives. So that's why most theologians agree that the reference in verse 6 to his concubines is probably talking about Hagar and Keturah. Because, well, for I think reasons we would all understand, Abraham only considered Sarah his primary wife, that the rest were just sort of afterthoughts. But notice he did the same thing with them that he did with Ishmael. He didn't let any of them hang around after they got to adulthood to be able to lay a claim on on any of Isaac's inheritance. He gets rid of them. Now, kind of makes you wonder. Abraham clearly, from records that we have there and things we can ascertain from the account that Moses has given us, he must have taught his kids about the true God, but he sure didn't let them hang around or have any claim to his inheritance. He gets rid of all of them before he got too old and they could have competed with Isaac for the inheritance. He made it clear Isaac got all of it. Also, notice when he sent them away, where did he send them to?
East.
Notice every example we have in the Bible of somebody being sent away or being exiled, it's always to the east.
Well, there's an ocean to the west.
Well, it depends on how far north you were. Or south. If Abraham lived in well, of course we know he probably lived out his days in Hebron, but you only had to go a few miles to the south before you could turn west and go across North Africa. If you went north now, granted, you had to go a little bit farther, about at least 100 miles before the land turned back toward the west. But he consistently sends them to the east. Now, I realize that I'm doing a little bit of interpreting here when I throw this out, but I find that there's just so much in the Bible that, again, as we've agreed before, nothing in the Bible is coincidental. When Jesus returns, sets up his kingdom, which gate does he enter at the temple?
East.
And he comes from what direction? From the east. So everybody here, what's that?
Comes from the east and goes to the eastern gate.
Yep.
It's just blocked off right now.
Everybody here, when they are being exiled, and even Adam and Eve, when they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, which direction did God send them?
East.
Sent them east. So every time somebody gets in trouble or they get sent away, they're sent to the east. When Jesus returns, he comes from the east. It just makes you wonder if there's a parallel there. Of course, Jesus is certainly not being sent into exile by any means, but it just seems like when people are leaving, they all head toward the east, but in his return, Jesus comes from the east. Just something to consider.
Wasn't there a case, I can't remember whether it was, which prophet it was, but when God left the temple, didn't he go east? When the Shekinah glory of God, I mean, when he sees it either in a vision or something like that, God leaves the temple before it's destroyed the first.
Yep, and it was King Solomon's temple, and it was, I believe, I'm not positive on this, but I believe it might have been during the reign of Manasseh. That yes, it says that the Shekinah glory left the temple, and I think you're right. It says that the glory of God was just departed.
Because it was like a progression. It was a certain place in the temple, then another, and then finally outside the temple.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of being sent away to the east, you're being sent off into the unknown, off into the wilderness,
Mm-hmm.
off seeking what? What are you sent away seeking? Redemption? Because you've been sent away? Because you've been cast out?
I think in Abraham's.
So if you're seeking redemption, where do you go to find that? You go to God to find that.
Mm-hmm.
And where does God come from when he comes to us? From the east. So you're being sent out to find God when
Could
you're being
be.
sent away.
Could be. That's a good, interesting way to consider it.
Took me a while to think about that.
Yeah. You write a book about that.
Well, when God sent Adam and Eve to the east, he was standing right there.
Mm.
They wasn't going looking for him.
No, that's true.
He just got in trouble.
Yeah. But on the other hand, now of course, you can't make this parallel with the Garden of Eden because the world's geography wasn't the same as it is today. But if you go east from the temple or where the temple was and head east, what are you going to find? Desert.
Desert. It may have been an ocean before that.
That's right. Well, you know,
Yeah.
what was it then?
Well, it wasn't at the time of the Garden of
Mhm.
Eden. Nobody knows, you know.
Yep. All right, but also back to verse 6. Notice when Abraham sends these other sons out, it doesn't just say that he sent them away. Notice it says sent them away from his son Isaac. Basically, he's getting rid of any competition. He's having a whole pile of kids here, but and I guess I point this out because today, all of Abraham's descendants, except Isaac, it's all of them against the descendants of Isaac.
Ishmael.
I'm including Ishmael with all the others.
Okay.
All of them against the descendants of Isaac. And even that we see today. It's Israel against basically everybody else. You have to wonder if Abraham unknowingly set this up from the beginning, because look at it from their perspective. They're a child of Abraham. They know their dad is absolutely filthy rich. He is a man of importance. And you're thinking, my dad's Abraham. And then you get called in one day, and I got a gift for you. By the way, you need to leave now. Get out. I'm saving all of my inheritance for your older brother Isaac. You get booted out. As they leave, do you think they went out with a smile on their face?
I was thinking along those same lines that he really didn't treat his other children very well.
No, he didn't. Not at all.
Well, Jesus gives everything. I mean, God gives everything to his Father, gives everything to his Son. We're just inheriting it.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Jesus is not a good parallel for this because in his case, God doesn't have any other kids other than us.
Yeah.
And unlike Abraham, those of us who are adopted children of God,
Share the inheritance.
we're told that we will share in the inheritance.
And I was thinking more to his created ones.
Mm-hmm. So God does not treat us as Abraham treated his other kids. We're told that we will inherit the kingdom.
And I'm having to wonder, is this something Abraham did on his own, or was this something that God moved Abraham to do? Because God wanted to set it all up to happen this way.
Unfortunately, that we can only guess at. We don't know what was in Abraham's mind at this point. All right, verse 7. It says, and these are all the years of Abraham's life that he lived, 175 years. Now again, Sarah lived to be 127. He lives to be 175. So he outlived his wife by a considerable amount of time. Something else I might point out here. Notice that most of the men during that particular period of Earth's history tended to be older when they got married. For example, we're going to see in verse 20, Isaac was 40 before he married Rebekah. And Rebekah was probably pretty young. Sarah, we know, was 10 years younger than Abraham. And we could compare with Jacob. Jacob married Leah and Rachel, who were, a good bit younger than him. But yet notice that even though the men were considerably older when they got married, unlike today, notice how many of the men outlived their wives. And Abraham didn't just outlive Sarah, he outlived her by several decades. Isaac outlived Rebekah. Jacob outlived Rachel. Interesting twist on human lifespan.
It was because them women had all them kids.
Really?
They wore out quicker.
And men didn't have the stress of modern life.
I guess not.
The women took care of him.
What's that?
The women took care of him.
Well, I just noticed, it just occurred to me a few days ago how much older that these men were when they got married, and yet they still outlived their wives, which is kind of unusual today.
Abraham also basically outlived the lifespan that God had allotted, with 120 years that God had allotted after the flood. So God granted him an exceedingly long life by those standards, not compared to the pre-flood lifespans, but compared to what God had set for the lifespan to be after the flood.
Yeah.
He granted Abraham an exceedingly long life.
All right, verse 8 says, and Abraham breathed his last and died in a ripe old age, an old man, and satisfied with life, and he was gathered to his people. Now the phrase gathered to his people, that's a frequent phrase in the Old Testament that just basically means they buried him with his ancestors. Or that they recognized that in death that he would be with his ancestors. That's all that phrase means. It's just a euphemism for he got buried. Verse 9 says, then his sons... Now here's the interesting thing. Ishmael got sent off. And he had been down at Beer Lahai. And of course, then we have no record of where he went after that, but we see that Isaac is then the one who apparently is in possession of that well down at the southern end of Canaan. But now in death, we see that, says verse 9, then his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, also notice the other 6 from Keturah, not mentioned, they're gone. But Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre. Now, why is that field important?
Sarah.
Yeah, they buried him with Sarah. Same cave.
And the only piece of land he owns.
And the only piece of land he owned.
But it's interesting that Isaac and Ishmael are together burying their father. They're not at odds with each other, at least for the burial of their father.
Which is why I wanted to point that out. Excuse me. Now, why is this important? Because, again, Ishmael got sent off years before, and, of course, he was still just a kid when Abraham basically ran him off. And now, in his adulthood, he's back burying Abraham, And apparently, as Merrill mentioned, he and Isaac are burying Abraham together. What does that tell you about Ishmael's attitude at this point?
Forgiving.
He respects Abraham.
What's that?
He must respect Abraham to come.
Well, maybe. What'd you say?
Forgiving. Forgiving.
Possibly. What about this possibility? Who ran Ishmael off?
Sarah.
Sarah did. Absolutely. Do you think Ishmael and Hagar, when they left, knew who was at the who was the source of that conflict? Now, of course, Ishmael was just a kid at the time when he, made fun of Isaac. I mean, it's believed that he was probably around 13 or so. What 13-year-old doesn't do something stupid? But Sarah apparently got livid about it and demanded that Abraham get rid of him. Now in his old age, Ishmael has shown back up, participates with Isaac to bury Abraham. I see this as an indication that Ishmael went away with this, at least as an adult, without any ill feelings toward Isaac or Abraham. Who do you think he probably blamed for the conflict? Sarah.
And even if he didn't understand it at the time that he went away with his mom, you got to imagine his mom probably put it in his head that it was that woman who drove us away.
Oh, absolutely. There's no telling what he probably heard as he got older. And if she is still alive, by the way, notice that there's nowhere anywhere in here that we're told about the disposition of Hagar or Keturah. They're just not mentioned anymore. We don't know when they died or what happened to them. Not a thing. But the fact that we have Isaac and Ishmael burying their dad tells me that Ishmael probably didn't blame Isaac or Abraham for this. He blamed Sarah for the conflict.
I guess you could also look at it from a mercenary standpoint that maybe he showed up hoping to get a piece of Dad's pie.
And that's always a possibility. But by this point, we know from what Moses has already told us, as an adult, Ishmael was pretty well off himself.
He'd already established himself.
Mm-hmm. Now, it says, was in the cave of Machpelah. Verse 10 says, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. Remember, the sons of Heth, they were the Hittites. It says, there Abraham was buried with Sarah, his wife. Again, notice this is presented as Sarah, his wife. And that's presented in singular as though Sarah was the only wife, which tells it, is kind of telling in how it describes the other two, which gives some credence to the belief in verse 6 that the reference to the concubines was the other two. Because Sarah's the only one listed as the wife. What's that?
The first.
Yep. Verse 11 says, and it came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived at Beer-lahai-roi. Notice, once again, the reference that Isaac is living in the south country next to the well that had belonged to Ishmael. We don't know where Ishmael's gone, but beginning in verse 12, we're told about his family. So now, these are the records of the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. Notice it's almost this condescending way of describing Hagar.
She's not his wife. She's
Yeah.
Sarah's maid.
Not the wife, says, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. She is not described as a wife. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names in the order of their birth: Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, and Adbeel, and Mibsam. So if you're looking for names for your cats, there you go.
Mibsam, yeah, that's a good one.
And Mishma, and Duma, and Massa, and Hadad, and Tema, Yatur, Naphish, and Kedema. Well, some strange names. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their villages and by their camps. Notice, 12 princes according to their tribes. Do you think it's coincidental that both major parts of Abraham's family ends up divided up into 12 tribes? You have the 12 tribes of Israel, and also the 12 tribes of Ishmael. What's that?
They mesh right up.
Uh-huh. I don't think this is coincidental. And these, verse 17, these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. Notice he lived a considerably shorter life than Abraham did.
But still 17 years longer than the 120 allotted.
So these are the years of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. Once again, there's that phrase, gathered to his people. Again, that's just a euphemism for they buried him. And they being the descendants of Ishmael, they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt, as one goes toward Assyria. He settled in defiance of all his relatives. Now, in the original Hebrew, that's, depending upon which version of the Bible or which translation you're looking at, that last little phrase there is translated various ways. But in the original Hebrew, the essence of it is that they were in constant conflict. And of course, what was prophesied about Ishmael?
He'd be a man of great battle back at him. Right?
Yeah, that Ishmael would be, a wild donkey of a man. Yeah. And what we see here is that his kids, as they grew up and moved out, and by the way, where this is describing is again all across the Arabian Peninsula, all the way northward to where we today would see Syria. So they were scattered, several hundred miles north and south across what today is Arabia, all up into Syria. But they were in constant conflict with everybody that was there. That hasn't stopped. That's one of the reasons, again, that we see this today is the conflict, even though Isaac and Ishmael apparently made up and got along, what we're seeing here is that Ishmael's descendants, every generation since then, in constant conflict. And what do we see going on today? They can't, and it's not just necessarily against Israel. Even the Arabs can't get along among themselves. You got the Saudis don't get along with the Iraqis, who don't get along with the Iranians, who don't get along with the Egyptians. This whole region of the world has been a hotbed of conflict and war for 2,000 to 3,000 years. It all goes back to this. They're still in conflict with each other. Questions this evening? All right. We're going to take a break there at verse 19, and we will pick up with the story of Isaac and his descendants. And the reason I don't want to get, even though we got about 10 minutes left, I don't want to get into it, is because covering the issue of Jacob and Esau, that in itself is going to take, the whole evening on Sunday to cover all of that, and I figured this is just a good stopping spot. Any questions?
I've got just a
What's that?
silly question.
All right.
My King James translation never once puts the B-E-E-R in front of the well.
Beer La Jolla.
Yeah, why?
Because beer is merely Hebrew for well, so if it says it's the well of Lahairoi, all they've done is taken the word beer and translated it. Beer is Hebrew for the well.
So the name of the well is Lahairoi?
Uh-huh.
New King James says Beer La Jolla.
Huh?
New King James says Beer La Jolla.
Yeah, well,
Beer La Jolla.
Lahairoi. Hi, Roy.
KJV doesn't know.
Beer
Yeah.
Lahai.
Yeah, beer is there in the original language. The only difference is, again, in Hebrew, beer simply means a well. And it's just a matter of whether they included it as part of the name or whether they translated it. The King James just translated it and calls it the well at Lahairoi, or the well Lahairoi, whereas the New King James, New American Standard, some of the others, they don't translate it and call it part of the name, Beer Lahairoi. But that's all it means, is that it's a well. Not anything important. All right. Lou, would you lead us in a benediction?
Father, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for letting Pastor teach us your word, and that we may be able to apply, understand how it's so relevant even today, that what occurred then is occurring now. We shouldn't be surprised, but we should know, because your word also tells us what we can expect. I also pray that we all leave here fulfilled and able to help others in understanding this, and especially that they look to you for their salvation. I pray that Connie has a good trip, and that everybody that's missing tonight will come bells on Sunday to worship you. I pray all this in your name, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
I watched a